The wind howled across the Montana plains like a lonely wolf mourning its pack. The snowstorm had started before sundown, and by nightfall, it had turned the whole valley into a curtain of white rage. Beneath that merciless sky rode a man, tall, broad-shouldered, his face carved by the wind and time itself. His horse, a dark Mustang named Shadow, pushed through the storm with slow, measured breaths, hooves sinking deep into the snow. The man was Eli Carter, a cowboy who had seen too many winters, too many broken promises and too much silence. He wasn't heading anywhere in particular, just away from everything that had hurt him. Eli had been drifting since the cattle war the previous summer, where he lost his ranch and half his friends. Folks said he was a man who'd given up on life but couldn't quite let it go either. That night, he'd been heading toward the mountain pass, trying to reach an old trapper's cabin before the storm made it impossible to move. But fate had other plans. Through the blizzard, his ears caught something faint, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. It was soft, almost swallowed by the storm, but it came again, a cry, a human cry. Eli pulled the reins hard, eyes narrowing under the brim of his hat. "Whoa, boy," he muttered, scanning the white chaos. Shadow snorted, stamping in protest. Then Eli heard it again, this time clearer. "Someone was out there!" He kicked his boots into the stirrups and guided Shadow toward the sound. Snow slapped his face, the cold biting into his bones. For 20 long minutes, he searched through that wilderness, until finally he saw something dark against the snow, a broken-down carriage. Half buried, one wheel snapped clean off. A horse lay motionless in the harness, frozen stiff. Eli's heart sank, but then he saw movement. A figure, small and trembling, was trying to crawl out from the wreck. He jumped off Shadow and rushed forward. The figure turned, a woman, her face pale as moonlight, eyes wide with fear and frost. She was dressed in fine clothes, not made for the trail. Her gloved hands were stiff, her lips blue. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came. "Please, help." Eli didn't waste a second. He pulled his heavy coat off and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Easy, ma'am. You're gonna be all right." She was shivering so hard it looked painful. He lifted her into his arms, feeling how light she was, like holding winter itself. Her clothes were soaked, her hair tangled with snowflakes. He carried her to his horse, hoisting her carefully into the saddle before climbing up behind her. "Hold on," he murmured. Her body was limp, barely conscious. He could feel her cold through his own clothes, with one hand holding her close and the other gripping the reins. Eli steered Shadow toward the direction of his cabin, a few miles west through the valley. The storm didn't let up. Snow hit his face like shards of glass, and the horse stumbled more than once. But Eli didn't stop. He whispered to the woman now and then, just to keep her awake. "You're gonna make it, ma'am. Just a little longer. Name's Eli. You hang in there." She stirred once, her voice faint as a ghost. "Clara." Then she was silent again. By the time he reached the cabin, his fingers were numb, and his beard had frozen stiff. He pushed the door open with his shoulder stumbling inside. The place was small, a single room, with a stone fireplace and a rough wooden bed. He laid her down gently and went straight to work. "Fire first." He struck the flint again and again until a spark caught. Flames slowly rose, and warmth began to crawl back into the room. He removed her wet coat and boots, trying to preserve her modesty while saving her life. He wrapped her in blankets, rubbed her hands to restore circulation, and made her sip a little whiskey. "You're safe now," he said softly. "Just rest." For the next hour, Eli watched her sleep by the firelight. He could see she wasn't a trail woman. No calluses, no rough edges. Her clothes were expensive, the kind rich folks wore in town, not out here in the wild. What was a woman like her doing out here alone in a snowstorm? When she woke, it was morning. The storm had passed, leaving behind a still, frozen world of white and silence. The woman blinked at the unfamiliar room, confusion clouding her eyes. Eli was at the table, pouring coffee into a tin cup. "Morning," he said, voice calm, gentle. "You gave the storm a good fight, ma'am. Thought I'd lost you there for a while." She tried to sit up. Where am I?" "Hunter's cabin," he replied. "About 10 miles from Red Creek. You're lucky I was close by." Her gaze softened, gratitude and disbelief mixing in her eyes. You saved me. Eli shrugged, handing her the cup. Wouldn't have felt right leaving someone out there. Folks freeze fast in weather like that. She took a sip, her hand still trembling slightly. My name's Clara, she said. Clara Reynolds. She hesitated, avoiding his gaze, as if she didn't want him to know the rest. Pleasure, Miss Reynolds, Eli said. You from around here? She nodded slightly. Not far. I was traveling back to town. Something went wrong with the carriage. Eli raised an eyebrow. Traveling alone? She looked away. My driver didn't make it. The storm took him. Her voice cracked at the end. Eli looked down, hat in his hands, silent for a moment. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said quietly. Storm don't spare good men. They spent the day waiting for the snow to soften. Clara recovered slowly, color returning to her face. Eli cooked beans and cornbread over the fire, offering her the best share. They spoke in fragments, little pieces of their lives. He learned she'd been raised in the city, that her father was a man of politics. Though she didn't say how high, Eli told her about ranch work, about losing his land, about how sometimes life kicks a man down just to see if he'll get back up. As dusk settled again, the fire painted them both in shades of gold and amber. Clara watched him, his quiet strength, his steady hands, the way he moved like a man who'd known both violence and peace. She felt safe near him, even though she barely knew him. Eli, she said softly, you risked your life for a stranger. He smiled faintly. Ain't much of a world if folks stop helping each other. Something in his words stirred her heart. For the first time since the storm, she felt warmth deeper than the fire's glow. Outside, night crept over the mountains, and the silence of the wilderness wrapped around the cabin. Neither of them knew that by morning, their names would be tied together in ways neither could imagine. For Clara wasn't just any traveler. She was the only daughter of Governor Samuel Reynolds, the most powerful man in the territory. And Eli Carter, the lone cowboy who saved her, was about to find himself standing in the crosshairs of power, politics and passion. As the fire crackled and the snow glittered under the moonlight, fate smiled quietly, because sometimes destiny doesn't shout. It whispers right before the storm returns. The sun rose pale and distant, glinting weakly off the endless snow. Smoke curled from the cabin chimney as Eli stepped outside, breath clouding the crisp air. The storm had passed, but what lay ahead was a new kind of danger, one that didn't wear the face of winter, but of men. Behind him, inside the cabin, Clara stirred beneath the blankets. She had slept fitfully, haunted by dreams she couldn't quite remember. Yet when she woke and saw the rugged cowboy sitting at the fire, her fear began to fade like mist. Eli walked back in, brushing snow off his shoulders. The roads will be clearer by noon, he said, checking the fire. I'll saddle Shadow, and we'll get you to town before nightfall. Clara's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to protest. You've already done so much, Eli. I don't know how to thank you. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that came from deep places, the kind that hid pain. You don't need to. Just keep breathing. That's thanks enough. She looked at him then, really looked. His jaw was rough with stubble, his eyes tired but kind. A man worn by life yet still standing. She wondered what ghosts haunted him, and why fate had led her to him on that frozen trail. By midday, they were riding side by side through the snow-covered valley. The world was quiet, except for the crunch of hooves. Clara's cheeks were flushed from the cold, and she found herself glancing at Eli more often than she meant to. Eli, she said softly, you don't talk much about yourself. He chuckled. Not much to tell. I don't believe that. He hesitated, then sighed. Used to have a ranch near Silver Ridge, worked it near 10 years. Cattle war came, lost most of my herd, and the rest got burned out by men who wanted the land. Been riding ever since, taking jobs where I can. Her heart tightened. That's terrible. He shrugged. Ain't the worst thing that's happened to me. What could be worse than losing everything? She asked. He looked at her then, eyes dark and deep. Losing someone you loved more than life. Clara's voice faltered. You were married? Was, he said simply. Years back. Fever took her. Some things you don't ever heal from. You just learn to live with the hole they leave behind. Silence followed, a heavy, gentle silence that didn't need filling. Clara felt her heart ache for him. For the first time in her sheltered life, she understood the quiet strength of men like him, the ones who carried their pain without complaint. By dusk, the snow gave way to muddy trails and the faint outline of Red Creek in the distance. The town's lights flickered weakly against the twilight. But something felt off. As they approached the outskirts, Eli noticed movement. Men on horseback, stationed like sentinels near the ridge. Their coats bore a golden insignia, the mark of the governor's guard. Eli pulled Shadow to a halt. "You expecting company, Miss Reynolds?" Clara's eyes widened in alarm. "No, I didn't tell anyone where I was going." Before Eli could respond, a voice rang out. "Halt! By order of Governor Samuel Reynolds, lay down your weapons." Within moments, half a dozen armed riders surrounded them. Clara gasped as one of them dismounted and rushed forward. "Miss Clara, thank heavens you're alive. The governor's been frantic." Eli frowned. "Governor?" Clara turned to him, guilt flooding her face. "Eli, I should have told you. My father, he's the governor of this territory." The revelation hit him like a thunderclap. The woman he'd saved from the storm wasn't just any traveler. She was the daughter of the most powerful man for hundreds of miles. He stepped back, stunned into silence. Before he could speak, one of the guards shoved him roughly. "Step away from the lady, cowboy. You'll answer for this." "Easy," Eli growled, glaring. "I saved her life." The guard sneered. "That's not what it looks like. You were found alone with her in the wilderness. The governor will decide what to do with you." Clara protested. "No, he's telling the truth. He saved me." But her words were drowned out as the guards seized Eli's arms and dragged him toward a wagon. "Don't you touch him," she cried, but they ignored her. Eli didn't fight back. He just looked at her once, a quiet look, full of something she couldn't name. Trust, sadness, acceptance. That night, Eli was thrown into a cold cell beneath the governor's mansion in Helena. Chains clanked as he sat down on the hard floor, staring through the bars. He'd done nothing wrong, yet the world had turned against him again, just like it always did. Meanwhile, upstairs, Clara was wrapped in silk blankets, her father pacing furiously. Governor Samuel Reynolds was a man of power and pride, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, and feared by many. "You were found alone with a drifter in the middle of nowhere," he thundered. "Do you realize what that could do to your reputation?" Clara stood her ground. "Father, you don't understand. He saved my life. Without him, I'd be dead." "He's a vagrant," the governor spat. "A man with no name, no land, no future. Probably staged the whole thing." "That's not true," she cried, tears brimming. "He risked everything for me." But the governor was unmoved. "He'll face questioning in the morning. And if I find out he had any hand in what happened, he'll hang for it." Clara's heart broke. That night she couldn't sleep. She slipped out of her room, cloak pulled tight, and made her way to the dungeons. Eli was sitting quietly when she appeared, torchlight flickering across his face. "Clara?" he whispered. She knelt by the bars, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, Eli. I didn't mean for this to happen. My father, he's blinded by pride." He gave a small smile. "Ain't your fault, ma'am. Life's got a funny way of punishing the wrong folks." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You don't deserve this." He leaned closer. "You need to go. Don't make it worse for yourself." But she shook her head. "No, I'll make him see the truth." At dawn, the governor ordered a public hearing in the town square. The people gathered, murmuring as Eli was brought out in chains. Clara stood beside her father, pale but defiant. The governor addressed the crowd. "This man was found with my daughter after she went missing. We will hear the truth before judgment is passed." Clara stepped forward. "Father, please." But Eli interrupted softly, voice steady as the morning wind. "Ain't much truth to tell. Found her in the snow. She was half frozen. Brought her to my cabin." "That's it," the crowd whispered. The governor's expression didn't change. "You expect us to believe a drifter risked his life for nothing?" Eli met his gaze without fear. "Wasn't nothing to me. She needed help. That's reason enough." Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. Clara looked at him. This man who had no reason to fight for anyone, standing tall with nothing but his honor. Then slowly her father's anger began to falter. The truth in Eli's eyes was something even power couldn't deny. After a long moment, the governor spoke, his voice lower now. "You're free to go." Eli blinked, surprised. "That right?" "Yes," the governor said, "and you have my gratitude for saving my daughter's life." The chains were removed. Eli rubbed his wrists, nodding once. "Don't need gratitude, sir. Just don't hang an innocent man next time." He turned to leave, hat in hand, the crowd parting for him. But Clara ran after him. "Eli, wait!" He stopped. Tears glimmered in her eyes. "You can't just ride away." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's what men like me do, Miss Reynolds. We ride away before we ruin the good things." She reached out, touching his arm. "You didn't ruin anything. You changed everything." For the first time, his resolve wavered. He wanted to stay, to believe that maybe a man like him could have a place in her world. But he knew better. "Take care of yourself, Clara," he said softly. "You deserve sunshine, not storms." And with that, he mounted Shadow and rode into the horizon, snow glinting beneath the sun. Days passed, weeks. Clara couldn't forget him. The way he'd looked back one last time. The man who saved her heart as surely as he saved her life. One spring morning, a letter arrived at the governor's mansion. It bore no seal, just a rough hand and a simple line. "If you ever find yourself lost again, follow the wind. It'll lead you where you belong, you see." Clara smiled through her tears. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the cowboy rode on, free as the land itself. And though they came from different worlds, their souls would forever share one story, born in snow, tested by fire and bound by fate.